Okay, so October. And by the way, we have the Elams with us, and I'm going to let Chari jump in just a second and tell us a little bit about the magazine in Dayton. But before we get to that, a couple quick announcements. So we have our Texas Bee Supply Golden Cordovan is our super, super gentle queen bee. And then we have our Texas 5000 that we've bred to be our incredibly tough bee. Both Nooks and Hives are, and I believe Queens are as well, now available on our website. Now I know that early April is a long way away, but it's really important to book as early as you can, because when you book now, you can pick your pickup date. And what always happens inevitably is the longer you wait, the longer you wait to get your bees, because everyone wants their bees as early as possible. So if you book now, you can book the very early April dates. And in fact, the early April dates are already almost full. So so now is a really good time to go ahead and get those booked if you want them early. One other quick housekeeping thing I forgot to mention. If you have questions, put them in the Q&A box rather than in the chat box. So make sure you've got them in the Q&A box, and that way we can make sure to get those answered for you guys. The other thing, we have a class coming up that I'm pretty excited about. It's called The Business of Beekeeping, and it's a virtual class, and that'll be November the 14th, and I'll be teaching that. And it's really all about how to make money in beekeeping. You know, the old saying goes that the quickest way to make $1 million in beekeeping is to start with 2 million. But I'm going to try to show you guys how that doesn't have to be the case. And so starting from a hobby level, going all the way to a sideline or commercial level, how you can make some money in beekeeping. And we'll look at a million different ways to do that. Okay, the grand opening. So I'm going to let Chari jump in. And Chari, I think you're on mute, but while you guys get off, I'm so excited about this. And James and Chari, as you guys probably know, are some of our class instructors in the Dayton area. And then Chari is also helping us coordinate the grand opening event in October. So Chari, if you want to jump in real quick.
I would love to. I will tell you, I could not be more excited about October 24th getting here. It seems like we've been planning this for 2 years. Am I right?
It feels like it.
It does feel like it. We had a couple of, like, I don't know, COVID that came up, and it kind of delayed some things, but we are there, y'all. We are there. And the day is lined out with the beekeeper in mind. And we've got not only our wonderful host, Blake Shook, as come meet Blake Shook, but we've got Charlie Agar. He's out of New Braunfels. If you have not heard of Charlie, he's the star, a TV star of the PBS special that's called Charlie Bee Company. And it's incredibly good. He's hilarious. He's going to come. You can meet him, talk with him. Several other speakers, Cameron Crane, Lauren Ward, a couple of people we've not heard much about, but James and Sherry Elam, Chris Moore will be there. We're going to feed you. We're going to give you, y'all hear that in the background? A boat going right by. We're going to feed you. We're going to give away door prizes. We've got 3 huge door prizes that we're going to give away, drawings. We're going to give away a full-size colony, 2021 colony. We're going to give away a 5-gallon stainless steel honey tank. What was the other thing? Help me, Blake. What was it? I didn't bring my notes.
A
bee suit,
truck,
a bee suit.
Vacation home.
Really? I want my name in that pot. But anyway, October 24th, 351 County Road 6243, Dayton, Texas. Please be there. This is going to be an incredibly fun day. We're going to have, I'll call it entertainment, but it's really for you, the beekeeper. The store, you're going to be able to get your first eyes on the store. The floor is going to be, I'm going to tell you, it's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous facility, but it's going to be a good day, and it's all going to come together perfect. It's going to be perfect.
It is.
Absolutely.
I like to say that even though it has a Dayton address, that it's really just the other side of Lake Houston.
It is.
When you drive on 1960 coming from that direction, it's just right there, the other side of the lake. So it's really quick.
Yeah, don't let the Dayton address fool you, because it's just minutes out of Houston. From Conroe, we're there within 1 hour, within a minute or so. It is absolutely not that far from most all of Southeast Texas. So don't let that hold you back.
Great. Thanks, Chari. And if you're from our DFW area, we'd still love to see you in Dayton. And we're about to start working on renovating our Blue Ridge location as well. And we'll have a re-grand opening when that's done for if you're in the Dallas area. One other quick thing I wanted to mention here, if you're in the greater Houston or the Blue Ridge area, we are hiring. And we would love, whether you want to, we were hiring part-time and full-time. We're looking for warehouse help, retail help, and then just beekeeping experts. So if you're a beekeeper, even if you're not an expert, we have a lot of needs for our beekeeping knowledge and then retail and warehouse help. So enough on that. The other quick thing is the Texas Bee Supply Monthly Magazine. It's coming out this evening, so you should all be getting that. If you're not getting it, you can always find it on our website, but that's coming out tonight. It's 80 pages. Biggest and best one yet. So, okay. So with that, James and Chari, I'm going to let you guys get to those questions, and I'm going to get into, this says September tips, but this is actually October. So, don't let that fool you. Now, when I mentioned earlier, my computer crashed a few minutes ago, and I had to pull this file off of my iCloud on a different device. It didn't auto-save the latest version. So there's going to be a couple little things in here you guys are just going to have to forgive me on that didn't get transferred when that crash happened a few minutes ago. So this is October. Don't worry. I call this the Now What month because, you know, we've been talking about beekeeping for months, you know, and honey harvest and getting your bees through the summer and getting them ready for winter. And oftentimes we've been through all those really exciting events, and now it's oftentimes, well, now what? Now we've got our bees ready for winter. We've got the honey off. There can't be anything left, right? Well, there actually is, believe it or not. And so that's what we're going to focus on tonight is some of the things left to do before kind of the end of the year. I got to tell you guys, I am so excited about this fall. It's been a while since I've seen a fall bloom in most areas of Texas like I've seen this year. You know, July, we had a pretty major pollen dearth. August, we had a huge pollen dearth. And then it's like late August and September, it just started to rain across most regions of the state. If you read our Texas Bee Supply Monthly magazine, every month we have an up-to-date drought monitor of Texas, and it shows you the state of Texas on a map and where there's a drought and what the drought conditions are. And for this month, the last month, there's almost no drought anywhere except in far west Texas. There's a pretty major drought, but South Texas, Southeast Texas, Central Texas, North Texas, East Texas, there's virtually no drought at all. And so I'm seeing more blooms than I've seen in a long time this fall. So that upper left-hand picture here, that's the goldenrod. It just started blooming this week. Fantastic pollen and nectar source for your bees. If you go by your hives and they smell sour this time of year, you can almost have this sour smell. It's often the fall honey. Fall honey often kind of has fall honey and even fall propolis often has kind of a sour smell to it. And that's what it's from. The upper right is broomweed. And you see this, there's a lot of it in North and Central Texas. It's a great pollen flow for the bees, and it's going crazy. It's just now ramping up, and it'll bloom through most of October. The bottom left is aster, and it hadn't started yet. It's kind of the last thing to bloom in October and then dies out with the first frost. And then we're also getting the fall sunflowers blooming, and those are in full bloom right now. And there's a lot of other things blooming as well. So lots of great blooms right now, lots of fantastic blooms. And of course, we're going to talk about the repercussions of that and how that's beneficial in just a minute. So, but really, really cool stuff going on with the fall flow this year. So the current conditions, this is really kind of the end of bee season, if you will. I mean, it really is, it's kind of the end. Um, October, we have nice weather. I mean, for the most part, there's 3 to 4 weeks of really good pollen flow left, especially looking at current conditions. There's an increasing nectar trickle. So depending on where you are in the state, you might have a decent fall honey flow going on. And then there's really good slowly cooling temperatures. So we're not really seeing those extremes of crazy hot October or crazy cold October. It's just slowly getting beautiful. So things are just looking really good for October. And the 10, 15-day forecast is looking pretty good too. So encouraged there. Kind of our last month, our November call, we're going to be talking about, okay, what is winter clusters like? How cold should it be before we don't go in the hive? November, we're going to be shifting into winter. October is kind of our last month where we can talk about bee management because we can still get in there. So just a little bit for fun, you know, this is what we're doing commercially right now. Our bees, I have a couple hundred, 400 or 500 hives in North Texas right now, but the majority of our hives are up in North Dakota, and they are transferring right now on trucks to Idaho and into indoor climate controlled, atmospherically controlled warehouses. And these are some pictures here. You can see the semi trucks loaded with bees from North Dakota roll right into these sheds. They're unloaded, stacked up. These shed is a pretty crude term compared to what they are. These are fully automated, fully computerized, climate controlled buildings where we keep the bees at a perfect 40 degrees all winter long. And we control the CO2 levels, the oxygen levels, all that's carefully monitored and controlled. And then the bees stay in there until we pull them out to go to pollinate almonds, which is in California in late January. The advantage of this is that the bees hibernate perfectly at 40 degrees. In Texas or in the South, and we'll talk about this more in November and December, but it gets hot and it gets cold and the bees go out and they fly and there's nothing to forage on. They kind of just wear themselves out all winter long. And so you see in Texas or in the South, a slow, steady decline in strength of the bees as they're getting out and working kind of unnecessarily. But in the sheds, they don't get out and fly. And so they maintain a higher population. They also don't eat as much honey. In Texas, for example, as we've been talking about the last few months, you know, bees will eat 30 to 40 pounds of honey over the course of the winter. Well, in sheds, they eat about 12 pounds of honey per hive. So they're much more efficient because it's that constant 40 degrees. So hopefully that's interesting to you guys. I know it's not relevant, but interesting. So what do we do this time of year? Well, we just got back from Colorado. So this is the time of year for most commercial beekeepers that we take some time off because our bees are in storage until January. So it's never really true because we've got other things going on and we've got bees in Texas, but basically this was an excuse to show you a cute picture. So, okay. So October bee growth. This is one of the reasons I'm kind of excited about October because I'm really kind of seeing an unusually significant October bee growth that I don't usually see in Texas. Usually there's a little bit of growth in October as a pollen flow kicks back in and you kind of have a final burst of bees reared to overwinter. But I'm seeing a lot more growth than normal this October. And that's because we had such a good pollen flow starting in about mid-September and it's going on strong now. And the bees are just really growing. So in general in Texas. So it's a really good sign. This is the final month of major bee rearing before winter. And so there's a lot of brood rearing going on right now in most hives. Brood patterns are looking good as that queen really starts laying again. And this is usually the final burst of energy. And in some places you may have a couple frames of brood in November, but it really starts taking a nosedive brood production wise in the month of November. And that's okay, that's expected. Occasionally you have a really hot November and you can have a lot of brood rearing going into November. don't think that's going to be the case this year. I hate to predict, but it's not looking like it's, you know, it's cooling off already in October. My suspicion would be we'll see great brood production through October, and then November we're going to see a pretty hard nosedive in brood production. And so this is the final month to really make sure your hive is prepped for winter. So what does that mean as we look at, okay, now what in October? We've talked a lot about trickle feeding over the course of the summer. That needs to end, so you can kind of shut down that trickle feeding. And the goal at this point in October needs to be making sure your hive has enough honey or syrup stored to make it through the winter, because October can turn cold quickly. So if your hive only has 15 pounds of stored honey or syrup in their second box, and they need 30 to 40, and all of a sudden the last half of October gets really cold, the bees probably aren't going to store the honey that they should have had in that second box. So the goal is for October to, if they don't have it, to make sure you've got 30 to 40 pounds of honey or syrup stored in your second box, and then 3 to 5 deep frames of honey in the first box. And that should be achieved definitely no later than the 1st of November. So you might have to feed nothing if your hive already has that, or you might have to feed a gallon a week to get there. So, and then you can continue, of course, feeding Pro Health with the syrup and probiotics as needed. That never hurts. Okay, so on the flip side, another issue we can often have is, okay, I overfed my hives, or maybe they're bringing in a lot of nectar that you weren't expecting, and they have too much honey. And so I'm going to play this video that goes over what to do if you have a hive that has too much honey. And then I've got some key points listed out here in case the video is a little choppy for you. So it's a pretty short video. I'm going to play it. And then in case you aren't able to see it too well, I'll revisit the key points. So let's talk about honey bound. Sorry, that audio didn't start. Right, here we go. All right, let's try that again. You guys play with Texas bee supply here, or rather, play with Texas bee supply's hands. So let's talk about honey bound hives. So this is a hive that we did a little bit too good of a job feeding, and they've got so much honey that the queen doesn't have anywhere to lay. Now, this is less and less of a concern the later in the year we get. So I'm going to say, you know, mid-November or later, I'm not that concerned. The queen doesn't need to lay much anyway. However, if it's, you know, the summer or early fall, you want to make sure the queen has room to lay so that she can keep laying. In this particular hive, I've already checked, and this second box is completely full of honey. Every frame is completely full of honey. There is no brood up here. Pounds. If you've got only half a box full of honey up here and half the box is empty, I'm not too concerned because there's room for the bees to move that excess honey. What concerns me is when I go down into the second box, it's completely full of honey as well. And as I'm going through here, there's our bar strips for treating the mice. As they go through here, the queen doesn't have anywhere to lay. So all these bottom frames are completely full of cap honey. She's got a little bit of brood. She's only got about 2 frames of brood down in the bottom box. The reason is all the other frames are full of cap honey. So there's a frame of brood here, down here in the bottom box. But there's only 2 frames of brood, and all the frames right next to her are completely full of cap honey. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do 2 things. One, I'm certainly going to stop feeding. But I'm also going to take a frame of this cap honey, or a frame of honey on either side of the brood, and I'm going to set it 20 or 30 yards, 20 or 30 feet away from the hive for about a day. Let the bees rob it out. So get another frame of whole honey So I've got my 2 frames of brood right here in the middle. I've got my 2 frames of honey that I'm going to let the bees rob out. Once the bees have robbed out my 2 frames of honey, which will probably take about a day, I'm going to bring them back and I'm going to put them back in the hive on either side of that brood, right where they were. Now this just gave the queen 2 empty frames on either side of her 2 frames of brood that she can now lay in. I'm going to put this top box back on the hive. It's also not a bad idea to put an extra box on top. If it's, I'm going to say if it's, you know, between July and October, I would put an additional box up on top so they can keep the things out of this bee's way. This, you know, mid-October or November, you know, you probably don't need that extra box. But letting the bees rob it. Okay, I'm going to pause it there. I think a lot of you are saying that you're having a hard time with the audio coming through. So I'm just going to hit the key points on this one really quickly, and that may work a little better for you. The bees got really angry doing that one, and I think they were making it awfully hard to hear that audio. So essentially, you know, and hopefully you were at least able to see the video, and it's on our YouTube page as well, and you might see it a little better on there. But if you've got a hive that has way too much honey in it, you know, when I'm really, it's less of an issue the later in the year it gets. Because, you know, in November and December, well, the queen's not laying anyway. And, you know, if they've got extra honey, then they're just going to eat it. However, for October and in November, we still want that queen to have some room. So the queen should have at least 4 to 6 frames available for her to lay in the center of the bottom box in October. If she doesn't, you know, if there's only, like this hive we were going through here, only had 2 frames of brood in the very middle, and all the rest of the frames in the bottom and the top box are completely full of honey. So what you can do is you can take, you've got your 2 frames of brood in the middle, you can take 2 frames on either side of those 2 frames of brood out, set them out 20 or 30 feet away from the hive, let the bees rob them out over a course of a day or 2, and then put them back on either side of your 2 frames of brood, and now the queen has room to lay again. You could also put a box of comb. It's getting a little late in the year to do that, so not, you know, you could, if you have a box of drawn out honeycomb, you could put it on top. They may or may not move that honey up through October, and then of course stop feeding. But the other key is to keep your eyes on that hive, because a strong hive can eat through honey quickly. So make sure that, one, they don't keep bringing that natural nectar in and plug out those frames again, but also make sure that they don't run out of food. So just keep an eye on them if that's happening. Okay, so this is something that I find really exciting. This is a picture of pollen that I took over the past couple of days. So it's amazing how much pollen the bees are bringing in right now. These frames are, as you can tell, they've got brood in them, but they're also surrounded by pollen. You've got a beautiful ring of pollen right around those frames. And that picture on the far right, they're actually even a little bit pollen bound to where you've got, they're filling in the brood nest with pollen. And so it's a great sign. I mean, we're seeing that all over the place right now. In most areas of Texas, just a tremendous pollen flow. And these just illustrate that. So when it comes to feeding pollen substitute, I've actually backed off a little bit. And I can't believe I'm saying this because I rarely back off in October on pollen patties. But if you've got, if your hive is borderline pollen bound, or if you've got, you know, at least 1 full frame of pollen in the hive, front and back or more, I wouldn't totally stop feeding pollen substitute in October, but I'd back off a little bit. So what basically my plan is I'm not feeding pollen patties for the next 2 weeks. And then the last week of October, I'll probably go in and put a 1 pound patty in each hive. And then I'll start feeding heavily again through November. So I'll give them a couple patties in November, and then that'll be it for the year. I don't usually feed pollen substitute in December. So 1 patty towards the end of October, a couple in November, and then I'm going to call it a year. Varroa mite, we've talked a lot about varroa mites. I'm not going to really focus on them tonight. You guys are aware, you know, October is the final window of treatment. If you haven't treated this year, make sure you get a treatment on there. And then if you treated early in the year, like July, definitely test again. This is just a chart I put together that kind of shows the varroa threat levels in Texas. And they start going down in October and November because there's not as much brood in general being reared in October and November. But you can still have a major problem in these months if you didn't take care of it earlier in the year. And this is just one image I wanted to show you, because on the image on the far left, all those little dots in that Varroa Easy Check are varroa mites. And so this was a hive that we tested with we treated with Apivar strips right after pulling honey in July. The mite levels were almost zero. And then we tested again. This was 2 weeks ago now that we tested this hive, and we got 40 varroa mites out of 300 bees. So a huge infestation. I don't even know if this hive is going to survive or not, but they were at zero back in July. So it's so important that if you haven't tested this fall, do another test, because those varroa mite levels can really spike even after July. Sometimes they don't. About half the time, they don't. So it's no guarantee, but definitely test again if you haven't in the past month, and make sure you don't have a problem. Okay, so kind of ending on that, James and Sherry, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. James and Sherry are going to talk about something we get a lot of questions on, which is oxalic acid. And it's a great treatment to use, especially in the fall. And so they're going to talk about oxalic acid, how to use it, what it is, for a few minutes. And then when they're done, I'm going to jump back in, and we're going to talk about things like entrance reducers, screen bottom boards over the winter, wind blocks, a few things like that. So James and Sherry.
All right. Hi. Our
Hi,
turn.
everyone.
Our turn. And you know, we're where everyone wants to be. We're in front of the Colorado River in Matagorda Bay on vacation.
You're welcome to come join us.
You are. We got room. Come on.
We're honeybee fishing, and we're doing really well.
No, we're not honeybee fishing. We are fishing. But this is a great topic for this time of year, because so many people, and we got a couple of questions of what do we use this time of year? It's, you know, we're out of the heat of summer, and now we're into the fall as it progresses. And oxalic acid is one of those options that often is used in the fall. Blake, if you'll go to the next slide for us, and Blake's our slide operator for us tonight.
Yeah, the oxalic acid is one of those conversations that bee clubs and webinars and conventions all seem to bounce around, and everyone has their thoughts and opinions on it. But we're going to relate some specific information to you on what OA is, and how it's properly applied, yep, and what the results you should obtain are when used properly. It's
popular. And it seems funny that you would use that word, but it's a popular method. There's probably more people out there making YouTube videos on different ways to do oxalic acid.
And you know what they're also doing? What? There's probably more videos on people that are using it incorrectly.
I know.
Not only are they potentially not killing their mites, but they're also violating regulations.
Yeah.
There's some specific guidelines that have to be followed. So what does that clover have to do with OA?
Blake, next slide. Let us tell you. You ask, we'll tell you.
Well, I like this. So as a kid, I can remember going out and what I would call clover growing wild in the grass. We would pick it up and we'd chew on it between our teeth,
right?
And it would give you that sour flavor. It's like homemade candy. That's where OA oxalic acid comes from. Well, it's a guy thing. That's where it comes from.
It does. It's called wood sorrel. And isn't that something? It's out of the clover. Also, it's found in just common foods like spinach, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. See, that's why we're supposed to eat our Brussels sprouts, right? Grapefruit, chives, and rhubarb. So it is of nature. It's considered an organic of nature treatment method.
And I think we could safely assume that if it's growing on those vegetables and plants, that it's normally in our hives as well, naturally, because our bees are foraging on those items.
Oxalic acid is found in nature everywhere. Something I wanted to say, I don't want to take it from you, but in 2015, and we were kind of in the mix of this with the TBA as conventions were going, the timing, this was made legal for the United States to use oxalic acid in beehives. And what they did was allow each state the the option to either make it approved or not approved. And Texas approved it, and that was 2015.
And again, important to that approval was the establishment of regulations on how it can effectively be used, or I would use the word legally be used.
Well, it has to be labeled for use in beehives. You know, just because something is out there and you can get to it and it's there that I can go to the hardware store and buy it, doesn't mean it's labeled and we have the proper directions for its use, because what we're trying to do is help our bees, right? We're not wanting to do something that might harm them. So,
and that is a caution, and that some of the wood bleaches that are available, and that's what this is. It's sold in stores at retail
as wood
stores
bleach.
as wood bleach, but you have to ensure that if you elect to go that route, that there's not some additive in there. It needs to be pure wood bleach.
Right.
So we highly recommend that
To buy it from a beekeeper.
Yeah, truly buy it from a bee supply store.
And we do have that on our TexasBeeSupply.com. Okay, next slide, Blake.
Yeah,
please.
let's move on. So it is naturally occurring.
All right, so it's common and popular, like we said. The thought process behind oxalic acid is that it's absorbed through the varroa mite's feet. So through absorption, it passes through their bloodstream, which kills the mite.
So the mites actually have to come in contact with it in some manner.
Mm-hmm. I do. And also that second bullet point, only kills phoretic mites. What does phoretic mite mean? I remember when we were first beekeeping, and we sat through probably our first seminar about varroa mites, and it was all so very overwhelming. And somebody said the word phoretic, and I went, what is that? And then they went, it's like if you got a plate on you. That's what it's like for a phoretic mite on a bee. So just picture that. It's the mite that is hitchhiking on the bee.
Yeah, because varroa mites do not have wings.
They
So
don't.
all they can do is catch a ride,
That's
hitch a
right.
ride, and they do it on our bees.
That's right.
So it only kills phoretic mites.
Right.
It has no ability to kill any other mite other than an adult mite that's traveling on a bee.
No, in other words, cannot penetrate a capped cell.
And I said traveling on a bee. It could also be one that's in the colony hanging on to a cell.
Sure, that's right. It just can't be under cappings is all. All right, next slide, Blake. Gosh, Blake, it's just, I mean, I will get you in my office. All right, so these are the 3 approved methods. Now, we want to use that term very strongly. These are the 3 approved methods.
So that's Chari's implying that there are other methods that you will see on YouTube or that you may know someone who is utilizing.
Yeah.
And we're not going to discuss those because it's not legal to actually apply it that way. So we're going with these 3 methods.
Yeah, the most popular being vaporizing, and we're going to go through each one individually, but vaporizing is the most popular, dribble method, and then the spray method. All right, Blake, next.
I'm trying to rationalize that dribble with that ambulance. I'm not sure.
Oh. All right, so, but, you know, and I should have said this in the last slide, but go to honeybeehealthcoalition.org and you will see a video on how to, literally how to do all 3 of these in one video. We've got, Blake has one on our YouTube channel, Texas Bee Supply YouTube channel, of how to use, I believe it's the dribble method. I may be wrong on that, but anyway, go on there. But Honeybee Health Coalition, one video. Also, James and Chari wrote an article in this month's Texas Bee Supply Monthly that expounds on this in much greater detail. So we've also got that video embedded in that article. So look for that.
I would say that the reason that OA is so popularly used, so popular, is because it's so easy to use.
Yes,
and
probably.
The reason it's so easy, or a result of it being so easy to use, is that it's easily misused as a result of it.
Yeah.
So we're going to discuss the proper way of applying the vaporization method.
Okay. So
Vaporizing is just taking a solid and heating it to 157 degrees.
making it a gas.
And turns into a gas or vapor and floats up through a colony.
So that what you're seeing there, the upper left hand, I'm gonna point like you can see me. That's an oxalic acid vaporizing tool. They're fairly inexpensive and they last for a very, very long time. And then we've got that little small, I'll call it a garden battery, a 12-volt battery. And basically, you just take that wand, and I'm going to preface this by saying, follow the directions on the wand that you purchase, because they all may vary just a little bit, but this is the most common one. So you'll insert that wand in the entrance of your colony. You will seal that around with like a wet towel. Is that right?
You'll seal the opening to the box. Ensure that you don't have cracks or areas where the vapor can escape. If you do, tape it off. But seal your box up really good. You do not have to remove an upper brood box,
no,
because the vapor will travel that far. and then as shown on the slide, approximately 2 minutes. Insert it in there, and then remove your vaporizing tool, completely close the entrance up. And I suggest, or we suggest, that you use a wet cloth to close it up, and do so for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That gives the opportunity for the vapor to turn back into a solid and land where it's going to land.
Right. Lets it settle down and do its work. And then finally, remove that the cloth off the entrance. Use that same wet cloth to clean off your tool, because that wet cloth will get that residue out of there very well. What have I got a picture of right there?
Us?
No.
Oh.
Funny. Yeah. This is safety equipment. We cannot stress enough the importance of using safety equipment.
No, we can't. I know that when vaporization just began, we were seeing friends and even ourselves occasionally use the wand on a colony and think just because the wind is blowing that way and we're upwind from it, that we were not getting the effects of the vapors on our lungs. Chari and I have come to describe what we call beekeeper's lung.
Yeah.
Unofficially, beekeepers are subject to a tremendous amounts of smoke from our smokers, and who knows what we might utilize as fuel for that. The last thing we want to do is have vaporized oxalic acid in our lungs. The bees, once we vaporized a colony and we remove our wet cloth, they will remove the residue from that colony of the OA over the next 2 or 3 days. So they'll remove everything.
We can't do that out of our lungs.
We can't get that out of our lungs. And I assure you, it's going to be there forever, for the rest of your life.
Right.
And don't clog your lungs up. Yeah. Don't get beekeeper lung.
No.
So always wear your mask. Don't allow it to penetrate your skin. Wear safety goggles. Don't get it in your eyes.
Wear long sleeves. It's just, I mean, it's such a short process.
It is.
Do what you need to do and not harm yourself. You know, the biggest advantage, and I think one of the reasons why it's most popular, is you don't have to open the hive. You just have to do the entrance. You just have to get at the entrance. Now, we do wear our bee suit to do this, because the bees are not happy anytime we're messing with them. So anyway, all right, next slide, please.
Sometimes it actually makes them pretty hard or pretty mad.
It does.
So we talked about treating with OA, but we haven't described when to treat.
Right.
And we're not going to tell you which months of the year to treat with. We're going to tell you how to treat.
You can.
We know that, Chari mentioned earlier, that oxalic acid does not kill varroa mites under the cell, within the brood cell. If we look at the little basic chart that we have up here, the 3, 6, 12 equals 21, we know the life cycle, or the cycle of the honeybee in the box: 3 days egg, 6 days larva, 12 days under the capped cell, growing into the pupa stage.
That's right. So that 12 days all of a sudden becomes very important, because what did we say? It cannot penetrate if it is under a capped cell. So that's your focus. That is your focus.
So we can back up and say that if your colony is broodless, if you're treating for whatever, maybe you've caged your queen and not allowing her to lay, that could happen any time of year, and you have a true broodless colony, you can most likely only treat one time and get by with it. We're always going to stress that you test and treat with whatever your method is, and then, like Blake said, test again.
Test and treat.
But make sure that you're squared away. But a broodless colony typically can get by with one single treatment. A colony that has brood, let's go back to that 12 days of caps.
Yep.
We can't kill those. So we have to wait for them to emerge to kill them. If we only treat once with the vaporization method, all we did was kill the phoretic mites that were present in the box during that time of vaporization. So we have to apply additional treatments. The recommended method of doing that is to break that 12-day cycle into thirds. Let's treat on day 1, treat again 5 days later on day 6. So on day 6, we're killing the bees that emerge, or the bees, we're killing the mites.
The varroa mites.
No, we're killing the mites that emerged during that period of day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. So we're knocking out those mites. They emerge, they're phoretic again. So we're going to knock them out. And the third time, the same thing, 6 days later again, to wrap up our 12 days. If we skip any one of those, our cycle has been broken or not broken, and you're going to have adult varroa mites regrowing and starting all over.
Yeah, you really don't want to miss this cycle. Whether you do it, interchange those last 2 treatments, 6 in the middle and 5 at the end, regardless, hit that 12-day period so that you're getting a recycling of that brood emergence. First day, middle, and last day of cap brood
And that's
cycle.
a good way to remember it. But if you do it once and then go back and do it again in 2 weeks, look at all the mites that emerged,
right.
and you've backed up. You haven't gained any progress
This is
whatsoever.
in a colony that has brood. Okay, so only one treatment when there's not any brood, but then 3 treatments, basically once a week, for 3 weeks. Pretty easy, right?
It is pretty easy.
Next slide, Blake. All right,
Okay,
dribble
so vaporization, again, we stress
method.
beekeeper alone. We don't want that.
No.
Let's be careful with it.
That's right. So dribble method. This is in a broodless colony only. We mix the OA with 1-to-1 sugar syrup and use a syringe. You see that syringe. Usually she's wearing, or that person's wearing rubber gloves even to do the, I got a bug in my mouth, sorry.
To apply it.
That's right.
And they're only applying it in between the frames, not on top of the wood on the frames, but where the bees are. And they're dribbling, as shown on the chart, 5 milliliters. And that's a very important measurement. If you apply more than that, you're going to overwhelm your bees, and you could be killing some of the bees down there. 5 milliliters per frame, with a maximum of 50 applied per colony, regardless of how many boxes of bees that you have. Mm-hmm. So as you see, that's only 10 frames. So treat your strongest frames.
Right.
Do your best to stay within the limitations, that 5 milliliters. And we really recommend that you practice that with not water, but with sugar water, because sugar water has a different viscosity thickness than does water. So mix up some 1-to-1 sugar water, practice applying it with a syringe that has a marking on it, or measure some out in some way.
Right, that's right. And practicing is a big deal, because you really want to make sure you're getting it through there, because you're wanting that 5 mil, and that's all through that. You don't want to be jig-jagging and getting that on top of the frames as well, trying to get it just in the middle of the cracks. 1 treatment only. And James is right about practicing. That really is a big deal. That really is
important. And on the 1 treatment only, we're saying test, test, test. So what if I did not get a good kill? And you say 1 treatment only. Well, it means what it says.
Yeah.
So if we did not get the kill that we want, then we're going to need to utilize a different product of your choice.
Yeah, no, we won't do it a second time. They will ingest some of this, because it's basically what you're doing is dribbling it on their bodies to kill those phoretic mites. Because remember, that's all OA does, is kill phoretic mites. It's going to just get on their bodies, but they're going to ingest some, and we don't want them to do that back to back, because that could be very harmful, and we don't want to do that. So James is right. Go to another method if when you retest and you see that it did not get enough of the mites, that you would go ahead and jump to another method.
The dribble was very popular for beekeepers that had a lot of colonies, and that you could practice and do it really quickly. Yeah. Once you're comfortable utilizing it.
Larger scales, sideliner beekeepers and commercial beekeepers more often will use this, because they can do it expediently. And it's just a quick and easy run, and they got it done. And the other thing is, this absolutely has to be broodless, because the dribble method could harm capped brood. So do not do this if you've got brood. Right? Next slide, Blake.
Right, it can and will kill
brood.
Uncapped.
That's right. Larva. All right, the spray method. Boy, that's just exactly what the method implies. It's a squirt bottle. I mean, they should say squirt bottle method, but they call it spray method. And that's for packages or swarms. Well, I call it a squirt
bottle. It's really important that when you're spraying a package or a swarm, that you pre-feed your bees prior to doing it, so that we minimize ingestion that may occur. So mix up some 1-to-1 sugar syrup, spray the bees, let them digest it or consume it for a couple of hours, and then you can do the spray treatment for OA. If you don't pre-feed them, then the consumption will be way too high.
That's right.
And you'll lose some bees.
And you see what she's doing here. This is a package. Sorry for the noise, y'all. There's a big boat driving right in front of us. She's just spraying that packaged bee. So that's why it's so good for swarms as well. When we capture swarms and bring them back to our apiary, spray them before you install them. This is a great way to make sure that you're not introducing a varroa bomb to your bee yard that you know, because you've kept up with your varroa mite. Your mite loads are low. Don't just bring them a bunch of neighbor varroa mites to come mess up your bees. So Really and truly take this in consideration. This is a good method.
So that is the way to treat for packages.
It is.
It's the only approved method.
Did you read the mix 35 grams with OA with 1 liter of 1-to-1?
There you go. That's how you get started. Right. And then the application rates for 2 pound and 3 pound packages.
2 pound and 3 pound. So screenshot that if you're interested in keeping those figures on you. All right, next slide, Blake.
So those are the 3 approved methods.
They are. You know, this, I wanted to make the picture of that lung really, really big because James is not kidding about beekeeper lung. I've developed asthma over the years, and James kind of not far behind me. We, using a smoker has done its number on, because we've used a smoker a time or two. The last thing that we want to do is add to the problem with an outside chemical. Y'all really take this into consideration. You need to wear not just the mask like we're all wearing now when we have to go into a store. That's not the mask we're talking about. It's the respirator mask. Please protect your eyes, your lungs, and your skin. And don't mix it with other treatments. That's
real important. If you have Apogard or Apistan or whatever it may be on your colonies, you should not do OA at the same time. Just like you would not mix 2 treatments, you wouldn't use Apogard and another item at the same time. We just don't.
You can do them back to, we always recommend changing up. So if I did OA this time, then I would go to something Apivar or whatever, Hopguard or whatever was next in line, and also the right time of year and so forth. But don't do it at the same time.
About, we didn't discuss this, but in talking about the vaporizers, not only do they make the ones that go through the entrance, but there are some that actually are applied through a hole in the back of the colony.
Friends of ours have those.
There's a variety of methods of utilizing it. Some are more user-friendly than others, but they all have the potential to cause damage to your lungs if you breathe it.
Yeah, just don't. All right, last slide, we'll talk about efficacy. I love this word. Learned this from Lance Wilson many years ago. I love this word, efficacy. It makes us sound so smart, doesn't it? It really just means, was it effective? Well, it kind of is. Look at those numbers. When you go on to honeybeehealthcoalition.org and you read the efficacy of all of the different varroa mite treatments, oxalic acid's right up there at the top. It truly is. And the vaporizing method is really the lowest of the efficacy scale. The dribble method and the spray method are even higher than that. So the
95 is really good, but that's when used as directed. So it's not going to be that if you're utilizing it one time, as when you should have been using it 3 times. Or if you don't leave your wand in long enough, or you remove your towel too soon.
Too quick.
So you have to follow directions. So it's really, like I said, a takeaway. It is a safe and organic method of treating mites when we follow the directions, keeping safety in mind.
Always follow the directions.
I think it's interesting, like the way this program started off, what OA really is.
It's just
clover. It's naturally growing clover.
Just clover.
But when clover is used incorrectly, it can be harmful.
It can. That's all we got.
So those are the 3
Look
real
at the beautiful
methods.
Sunset, y'all, behind us. We wish you were here. We're done, Blake. Thanks, y'all.
Great. Thank you, James and Chari. I learned something there. That was great. Appreciate it. And there's a few questions in the Q&A that I couldn't answer about Oxalic, so I'm sure you guys will be able to. Okay, well, I don't have the beautiful sunset behind me, so you may just want to log off now. But if you want to hang around and see my boring background, then we're going to talk about a few other things. So I'm sorry the audio is so bad in that last video. I've got a few other videos that it wasn't nearly as windy, and the bees weren't nearly as mad. So hopefully the audio is a little better in these. If it's really bad and it's hard to understand, just start chatting and messaging me that, and I'll just pause it. But hopefully these should be a little better. But one thing I want to talk about is too many boxes going into the winter. Now, if you were with us in the September webinar, or if you read our upcoming magazine, I think in our September magazine, we also had an article about, how many boxes should you have going into winter, 1 box, 2 boxes. But we didn't talk a whole lot about what if you have too many and what to do about that. So this video shows a hive that has too many boxes and how to tell if you've got too many boxes on a hive. So I'm going to play that, and then I'll quickly go over the summary as well.
Hey everybody, Blake with Texas Green Supply here. So let's take a look at this hive as we think about going into winter. The date today is actually October 1st. And so October going into fall, hive in Texas, we talked a lot about how many boxes it should be. I found this good example of a hive that has too many boxes. So now keep in mind, this isn't March, this isn't April, we're not talking about going into a honey flow, we're not talking about spring or even summer, we're talking about going into the winter. So the general rule of thumb is you want enough boxes of honey on a hive. I usually recommend about 30 to 40 pounds of honey in a second box, and 3 to 4 frames of honey in your bottom rooms. Now, you can have more than that if your hive and boxes are all full of bees. This hive, however, has two deep boxes and then 2 medium boxes on it. Now, the interesting thing is, they're all full of honey, so they did a great job of storing honey. Really, we should have pulled a couple of these off and harvested them, but we didn't. So, or maybe they refilled them since harvest time. But what I look at is when you look at these boxes, they're full of honey, but there's almost no bees in them. You can see that they're virtually empty. So I'm going to pull up frames to show you. You can see there's virtually no bees on these frames. So this is a medium box. A full medium box is 40 pounds of honey. So this one is pretty much full of honey. I mean, every frame is pretty much full of honey. So that's this 1 second. If this was the only second box on this hive, this would be about enough to get them through winter. So this very top one, I'm going to pull off. Now let's look at the second box from the top. It's got a few more bees in it. You can see from this side, but not a lot. My general rule of thumb is if a box is 25% full of bees going into the winter, I'm going to leave it for now. This box is on the border. I would say it's about 25% full of bees. It's completely full of honey, but about 25% full of bees. If you pull out some frames, they've got a few more bees on them, but not a lot. So I'm probably going to end up leaving that third box. Let's just take a quick look at what's going on down below. So down below, I've got a pretty full deep of bees. I've got maybe 6 frames of bees down the bottom. And they've got a deep, this second deep has some beautiful brood in it. Look at that, gorgeous brood. So the hive's looking good. They've got about 4 frames of honey up here in the second deep, and the rest is brood. And then down below, in the very bottom box, so I'm lifting up the second deep, and I can tell you it's got about 30 pounds of honey in it. And then in the bottom box, it's got about 4 frames of bees and a couple frames of honey. So what I'm going to do with a hive like this, where you've got a bottom deep with 4 or 5 frames of bees, a second deep with about 6 frames of bees, and then this third medium, about 25% full of bees, I'm just going to leave it like this. I'm going to take that top deep off. I might come back in November, and if this top medium is empty, I might go ahead and pull it off. But for now, I'm going to leave it like this, take off that top deep. Bees just don't need it.
Okay, so the key points there is that, you know, if a box is mostly honey and it's 25% or more full of bees, then you can go ahead and leave it. You want to make sure each hive has at least 40 pounds of honey in the second or third boxes, and more is okay. If a hive has 60 pounds or 100 pounds and the boxes are all pretty full of bees, that's okay. If a box is less than 25% full of bees and there's already plenty of honey in all the other boxes, like we saw in this hive, it's fine to go ahead and pull that off. So, okay, and if you guys bear with me, we're going to talk about entrance reducers for a second here. But I think I know why that video is kind of jerky. And so as we talk about entrance reducers here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for a second so that I can fix what I think is going on there. So entrance reducers are interesting because they're something that a lot of people have questions about. It's also something people use as a management tool different times of the year as well, other than just the winter. However, the most common time is to use them are in the winter. So we're going to talk in this video specifically about how to use them in the winter months. And then in the spring, we'll talk about how to use them in the spring or summer in certain conditions. But the primary thing we're going to talk about in this video is using them in the fall, starting right now.
Hey, Blake with Texas Bee Supply here. Let's talk about entrance reducers and how to use them in the fall and the winter months. So an entrance reducer, it's in the fall and winter, its goal is really to shrink down the entrance a little bit to help keep the hive a little bit warmer. As your hive goes through the winter, they can protect the hive a little bit better from mice, which actually like to move into a warm hive in the winter months, and so a smaller entrance helps them just a little bit. This is not a critical element going into the winter. Commercially, we don't use them at all. On a small scale though, it doesn't hurt. So I usually like to put them on in mid to late October, about the time the daily temperature is in the 60s during the day. It's a great time to put these on. Before that, you could actually overheat a really strong hive if you still got daytime temperatures in the upper 70s or in the 80s. So for winter installation, what I like to do is I never use the smallest hole. I always use the largest hole. And you actually want to install it what looks like upside down. So you want to use this largest hole and you want it facing upward. That way, during the winter months, dead bees fall through the cluster, which often happens is dead bees fall onto the bottom board. And if you've got 2 or 3 weeks of cold weather when the bees can't come and go, you could actually have up to an inch or so of dead bees pile up inside the hive. And if that happens, and the entrance reducers like this, they can actually pile up and cover up that entrance. We don't want that, so we turn it upside down, and that way if dead bees pile up, they're not as likely to cover up this entrance. So to put it on, it's really simple. You just give your hive a little bit of smoke, and these entrance reducers just slide right in, just like that. Simple as that. And you're going to leave it on usually until those springtime temperatures get up into the mid to upper 70s. So, you're talking sometime in March, you can go ahead and pull it off. There you go.
Okay, guys, I am sorry. I need some caffeine tonight or something. I think you guys were getting an echo the first half of that one. I forgot to mute my other device, so I'm sorry. You think after 6 months of these things, you finally remember how to click all the buttons, but maybe by the time we get to the last video, you'll be able to hear it right. So entrance reducers, the biggest thing is they're not critical. I mean, we don't use them at all commercially. The big thing is they help keep the mice out a little bit, because mice do like to get into bees. When you do install them, if you install them, wait till the daytime temperatures are in the 60s, because the biggest risk with entrance reducers is closing up your entrance too much and it overheating the hive. It does help reduce the wind a little bit as well. The big thing is I recommend using the biggest entrance and facing it up, like you saw hopefully in the video. So, and all these videos are on our YouTube channel as well. Okay, I think this is the last video, so I think I know how to make them play now. The screen bottom board, so we get a lot of questions about, hey, what do I do with my screen bottom boards during the winter? That's a lot of open air space. So let me play this one, and it'll hopefully answer the question of what to do with the screen bottom board during this time of year.
Hey, this is Blake with Texas Bee Supply. So as we go into winter, you need to make sure if you have a screen bottom board on your hive that there are a couple things that you do to get your hive ready for winter. So one of the things that you can do is if you have this insert, this plastic insert, it can actually slide underneath your screen bottom board to fully cover your screen bottom board. But what I like to do is leave that screen bottom board open all winter, because as varroa mites fall off the bees over the winter, they're going to continue falling through that screen bottom board and dying. So what I like to do is just make sure that cold wind can't blow up underneath the hive. So if you take a look at this hive, cold wind can blow up underneath it. So what I like to do is just take some paver stones, something similar to this, and put them all the way around the hive. So on all 4 sides, depending on what kind of stand you have, all the way around, just to prevent cold wind from blowing up under that screen bottom board. And then leave it just like that all winter. The bees don't actually keep the whole inside of the hive warm anyway, so they're not going to be losing a whole lot of heat through that screen bottom board. They're just keeping their cluster warm inside the hive. So as long as there's no cold wind blowing up through that screen bottom board, they should be just fine.
Okay, so there we go. Got it to work, and that's the last one. I will link to all these videos in the follow-up email, so you can go watch them on YouTube or on our website a little better than you're probably seeing them on here. But so the big thing with screen bottom boards, you know, you can close them up, but you know, if you think of the bees in the wild, the bees in a hollow tree, it's wide open underneath them. They often have open areas underneath them. The big thing is you just don't want a bunch of cold wind blowing up under there. So block it off around the edge. And, you know, I would do this in the beginning to late October. You could even do it now. I mean, it's cool enough in the day, during the days that the bees don't really need a lot of ventilation under there. So just block it around it so that that cold wind doesn't blow. I do like to leave them open just because, like I said in the video, you can get that continual fall of varroa mites. But again, you can close it up as well if you want to. And that's not going to hurt anything at all. So this was one of the slides that didn't load when my computer crashed. But just for a second, I want to talk about wind blocks, because you hear a lot about blocking the wind, you know, putting a fence up or something to keep the wind, the north wind off the bees in the wintertime. This isn't critical. The pictures you don't have up here were just some of our commercial bee yards. The big thing I try to do in the winter is just make sure they're up against a tree line or there's trees around them. If maybe up against a privacy fence. The big thing, you know, you don't have to have a total dead calm where your bees are over the winter. You just don't want them up on a hill with no wind blocks where they're just going to get a brutal north wind all winter long, because that definitely reduces the temperature inside the hive, and the bees have to work a whole lot harder to keep the hive warm. So if that's the situation where they're in a wide open field, they're just going to get a brutal north wind, then I would do something to block that. A lot of people use hay bales. You can use a section of privacy fence. There's a variety of things, you know, even the little cinder block wall that's 3 feet, 4 feet tall works. Just something to block that extreme wind. But if your bees are anywhere near trees or up against your house or in your backyard with a fence, it's typically not necessary. The other thing you've probably read about are hive wraps. A lot of the beekeeping books, the beginning beekeeping books, talk about this. It seems like every beginning beekeeping book is written up north, and it seems like a lot of them aren't written for the southern perspective. But hive wraps are totally unnecessary. That's really not, you know, when you wrap a hive up north, they talk about, you can using tar paper, you can buy hive wraps even, and they wrap the hive and insulate it basically. But a cluster of bees inside a box, they really just keep their own cluster warm. They're not keeping the entire interior of that box warm. So hive wraps are borderline unnecessary even up north. It's definitely not necessary in the south. You really have a real risk wrapping your hive in the south, because if we get a sudden 80-degree day in the winter, which happens, you can overheat and cook your hive. So you really don't want to put any form of wrap on them in the south. Bees actually, believe it or not, handle the cold way better than they can handle the heat. So the cold in general, if you have a strong hive, and you've taken the steps we talked about, they can handle the cold just fine. Those brutal 110-degree days, those are pretty tough on them. This picture is actually up in New Brunswick, Canada. So up there, they do wrap them, and they probably have a point up there. So, okay. Oh, I do have another video. Cool. So now that we have it working, I think this is the last one. So this is a couple of quick things I wanted to show you. The picture on the left is the winter preparation checklist. And this is in our magazine that is coming out tonight into your inboxes. So this just is a checklist that goes over, hey, here is what you need to make sure you have done by November 1st. And I'll put this in the notes and the follow-up email as well. And you can print it off and you actually use it as a checklist if you want. It's also in the magazine. But in a nutshell, I'm not going to read it off to you because I hate it when people just sit there and read off a screen when you can do the same thing. So it basically outlines most of the things we just talked about tonight, but I'll email that out to you guys as a printable resource. And then the one picture, the video on the right here that I'm about to play, this is a hive. As I was going through hives today, this was one that I felt like was just completely ready for winter when it came to the honey stores in it. So I kind of wanted to show you guys an example of, hey, here's a hive that is ready for winter, looks good, should make it through the winter just perfectly. So I wanted to show that to you guys real quick.
Hey guys, Blake with Desert Creek Honey here. Sorry you can't see my face for this video. I'm guessing you probably are watching these videos to see the bees and not my face. So that being said, I want to show you guys a hive that is just beautifully ready for winter. So this is a hive. It's got 3 boxes. It's got 2 deep boxes and 1 medium box, which is fine if they're all full of bees. So what I'm going to show you is this top medium. Look at that. Almost completely full of bees. I'm gonna give them some smoke. Any box going into winter is at least 25% full of bees. I tend to leave it. If it's less than 25%, I don't usually bother. But as you can see, this one is pretty full. This is a medium box, and it is completely full of bees and completely full of honey. So every single one of these frames is essentially packed full of honey. That being the case, it's going to be 30 to 40 pounds of weight, which is more than sufficient. Down in the bottom box, we've got a deep box with a division board feeder, which is fine to leave in over winter. This top box is completely, well, pretty much full of bees. And then we've got some beautiful brood going on. When this video is taken, it's still September, so they're still rearing brood, but they'll start shutting down brood rearing. But they've still got some beautiful brood. We're about to pull our varroa mite strips out, so they've been treated for varroa. And as always, we'll do a test to make sure that the treatment works. You can see this beautiful band of honey around the brood, which is what we want to see. And then they've got a couple frames of honey up in this second box, but not a lot. I mean, they've got about 4 frames of brood up here and only a couple of frames of honey. So I'm kind of glad I've got that top medium on full of honey. So this is all honey. They've got capped honey. They've got some capped honey and brood on this side. So this hive has, I'm going to say, about 25 pounds of honey or so up in that second deep, along with frames of brood. And our bottom box is pretty light. I can already feel it. Our bottom box only has, I'm going to say, about 10 pounds of honey in it. And then I'm betting a lot of brood. So if this hive only had, yeah, see, we've got some beautiful brood down here, some beautiful pollen, great brood, great pollen, but very little honey down here. So if it didn't have that top medium on it, I'd be a little bit concerned. So we've got some great pollen, not a lot of honey down here. So they probably only got maybe 2 deep frames of honey in the bottom box. We've got about 4 in the top box. So if I didn't have that third medium on, I would be feeding them. And I would be feeding them until at least the second deep, assuming I didn't have that top medium box on, had, you know, maybe more like 6 or 7 frames of honey. But since I've got this top medium, it's at least 25% full of bees and about 30 to 40 pounds of honey. I'm just going to observe this hive. I'm probably not going to do a lot more feeding on it. I'm just going to watch it, make sure they keep this second box pretty much completely full of honey. I'll probably give them maybe a gallon through the month of October, probably another gallon of syrup through November. But other than that, this is a great hive ready for winter.
Okay, so and re-listening to those, I'm sorry about that wind. I usually have someone filming while I'm out in the bee yard, and they usually block the wind as they're filming, but I was by my lonesome this morning, so won't be that way next time, so sorry about that wind. Okay, so that is the big thing. That checklist, like I said, we'll email that out. And I just want to remind you, if you have any questions between now and the next Zoom call in November, you can always shoot them over to help@texasbeesupply.com. We've got our YouTube channel that we put all the videos on, and we'll send out the follow-up email that'll have a registration link for the November Zoom call, links to everything we mentioned, and our magazine. In November, we're really going to focus on just kind of mop up final management, and November will really just focus on, hey, you know, what can be done if there's a problem. We'll talk about hives dying and declining and how to diagnose hives that are dying and what you can do about it. We'll talk about winter clusters. So there's actually still quite a bit of relevant stuff to talk about. And then December, we'll probably actually get into some non-beekeeping management topics. We'll really get into probably some products of the hive, bottling and selling honey, some more maybe making creamed honey, etc. And so we'll get into some of that as well. One quick thing though, I did want to share a poll with you guys before you go. And there we go. We were always curious, and I know you guys are too, and we publish these polls in our magazine, so you guys can always see them there. But I was curious, of the hives that you did harvest honey from, how many pounds of honey did each hive produce on average? So, you know, if you've got 5 hives and each produced about 20, then you can put 20. It's just kind of a rough guess. It's always interesting to publish these results so you can kind of get a feel for how you compare to other beekeepers. So, and we'll publish this poll in our next magazine. And of course, I'll share it here with you guys too. But so yeah, so December, we'll probably get into some other products of the hive, how to make them, bottling and selling honey, that sort of thing. And then in January, we kind of start bee management again. I mean, January, the queen often starts laying. And so January, we'll kind of jump right into, okay, as your hive begins to grow, you know, here's what you should be doing, how to get ready for growth. And then by February, you know, we're in full growth swing. Full growth mode. So we'll be getting into beekeeping hot and heavy at that point. So, all right. So thanks for that poll. It looks like the majority of people, I'll share this with you guys, but it looks like 1 to 10 pounds and 31 to 40 pounds tied. So pretty normal for this year. Unfortunately, this was not a great year for honey production in general. So it wasn't the best spring. We're kind of having a better fall now than we had all spring long. So but we will close with that. Thank you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to keep putting them in the Q&A box. You know, we'll hang around for the next several minutes. If you've got any questions, feel free to keep putting them in there. You can always shoot them to the help@texasbeesupply.com as well, and we'd be more than happy to help. But if you don't have any other questions, then have a wonderful night, and we really hope to see you in November. Thanks, guys.